Forensic Officer Sergeant Thabo Mosia was at the Pretoria High Court as a witness there today. He admitted that the crime scene at Phosphorus Township on the East Rand may have been tampered with. Mosia, the state's first witness, also admitted that finding police officers and witnesses at the crime scene would have compromised the crime scene, shall I say. Joining us now to discuss integrity and handling of the crime scene is independent forensic scientist Dr. David Klatzow. Dr. Klatzow, good evening and thank you very much for your time and for joining us.
Good evening to your listeners.
The state's first witness, Forensic Officer Sergeant Thabo Mosia, conceding under cross-examination by the defense that the crime scene in the Senzo Meyiwa murder trial could have been compromised. 5-hour delay in processing forensic evidence, Dr. Klatzow. Is that the first thing that he should have done when he took to that stand, admit that there was contamination?
Well, the problem with contamination and damage to a crime scene is that it places the state in a position which is irrecoverable. You can't recover from it at all. And the reason is that you damage evidence which may be invisible to the human eye. So when you deal with a crime scene, you need to cordon off the crime scene completely, often wider than you think the crime scene might be, and you need to place an officer on duty to make sure that only people who are authorized and who've got a proper function on the crime scene are there. And there needs to be a record kept of times of people, and rank should not play a role. If you want to just come and have a quick look, it's got nothing to do with you. You should have a purpose on the crime scene. That's the first thing. And if you don't have a point and a purpose for being there, you shouldn't be on the crime scene. The second thing is that once you establish the crime scene, you need to preserve as much as possible. So you need to put down special access routes onto the crime scene, and you should use that. You don't go stomping around the crime scene in your big hobnail boots. You make certain that you go on a specific path which is laid down so that you don't destroy evidence. The other point about it is that when you're on a crime scene, you yourself will start to leave evidence, not only of DNA, but of fingerprints and other things as well. So you need to be properly kitted out in order to go on a crime scene. You can't just go on and drop hairs all over the place and put your fingerprints on things. You need to be properly gloved and properly wearing a forensic suit with proper covering for your feet. Now, when that is not done, you risk damaging the crime scene in such a way that vital evidence that may be required either for the prosecution or for the defense becomes totally compromised. And as I said, you can never get back from that.
Yeah.
You can always downgrade a scene of crime to a scene of death, but you can never go from a scene of death to a scene of crime again. You can't go in a reverse direction.
So, Dr. Klatzow, sorry, can I come in here? As far as then capacity is concerned, when you get a call as a forensic officer that there is murder, somebody was shot, I'm sure that's kind of reporting that you get. Do you go there alone? Is that enough capacity? Are people who are able to handle a crime scene of that nature on their own? Because the question of capacity was raised today by the defense lawyers.
No, you can't handle it on your own, number one. But what you can do as a single officer is you can make certain that the crime scene is protected. So you can put up barrier tape, and you can make certain that you stay there and prevent other people from wandering around. You may remember in the case of Oscar Pistorius, there were people wandering all over the site to the extent where his expensive watches were stolen from the scene. And you may remember that the police officer involved went onto the scene and destroyed evidence by not covering his feet, and was the subject of a Zapero cartoon, which is unfortunate. So one wants to be very careful about that. The same is true of the Van der Vyver, the Inge Lotz murder, where the police went onto the scene as out of idle curiosity, and badly damaged the scene. so that the investigating officer had to stand about 5 or 10 police officers out on the balcony and look at their shoes to see if they'd made some of the marks in the flat. That's appalling crime scene management, indeed. And one's got to be absolutely strict about this. I've personally involved in crime scenes where senior police officers came and brought a little touring party of idle passers-by onto the crime scene and seriously damaged the crime scene. There was nothing I could do about it.
Yeah.
But they should not be allowed on the crime scene, even if he happens to be a general in the police force. You say to him, have you got a reason to be here? What are you doing here? If not, go away.
Yeah. We've got two versions. One version says the 5 who were in the house after the deceased had been shot, he was still alive. They took him to hospital to save his life. The defense says the body was dead already when they took the body from the crime scene to go and dump it in the hospital. Would that be considered contamination by itself when you remove a dead body from a crime scene?
Well, the body should not be removed until all the ancillary investigations are done. So you would have to look at all sorts of issues relating to the body, how it was lying, where it was lying, whether there are drag marks, how the clothing was. Because the moment you move that body, you change the position of the clothing on the body, and you change the area where the body's been bleeding. And if you turn the body over, you will change the post-mortem indications of what we call lividity. So one's got to put your hand. The first thing you do when you go to a crime scene is you put your hands in your pockets, and of course once you've established that life is extinct, you can then you owe the duty to the person to make certain they're still alive, and if they are still alive, obviously that takes precedence over the crime scene. But if they're not alive, then the crime scene takes precedence over the body. So you've got to be absolutely certain of that. And that can be done by finding a pulse or finding a carotid pulse or anything of that nature. Just a radial pulse would suffice, you can feel, but a carotid pulse is better if you can find it. And that's what you should do. But after that, you put your hands in your pockets and you put up barrier tape. And you get a proper scene of crime team together to investigate the scene of the crime. And that's the way it should be done. And it often is done, but all too often, I'm afraid, it's ignored and people just don't think it through.
Yeah. How important are you as a forensic officer who is a witness in a murder of this nature? And how?
I didn't hear the first part of your question.
How important is your role as a forensic officer in a trial of this nature, and how important is your integrity and the integrity of your testimony in a trial of this nature?
Well, the value of your testimony is downgraded if it's a disturbed scene. So depending on the nature and extent of the disturbance, it can totally destroy your evidence. All you've got to do is stand on a fingerprint, or stand on a footmark, or touch a fingerprint, or drop your DNA, or mess up the DNA in some way. So one's got to, again, you've got to have a full forensic knowledge if you're going to be what is called a SOCO, a scene of crime officer. And there are special teams of SOCOs that go to, for instance, a British scene of crime. And the scene of crime officer is crucial. He will control that scene of crime.
The other officers who are there, are they aware of these intricacies of forensic detail?
Well, they should be.
Yeah.
They should be.
And
basic training.
And if they go ahead and they interfere with the crime scene, would you put that to lack of training, or would you put that to deliberate, I suppose, interfering with the crime scene?
Well, it could be anywhere between the two possibilities. I mean, you do get police officers who set out to destroy a crime scene for whatever reason, I don't know. But probably more likely it's plain common or garden ignorance.
Does this in any way collapse the case of the state?
It can do. It certainly can do. If you happen to destroy a vital piece of evidence which is unrecoverable, it can certainly end the case.